Before we dive in, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is mainly for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the trial of Sean Diddy Combs, as published by Inner City Press and corroborated by independent transcripts. The courtroom was silent. Federal marshals stood shoulder to shoulder along the back wall. The judge adjusted his glasses slowly, then looked down at the docket. "Call your next witness," he said. The gallery leaned forward. Even the defense team looked up, visibly caught off guard when the back door opened, and Usher Raymond IV stepped into the room. There was a visible shift in energy. Phones had been confiscated. No cameras. No press allowed to record. But the moment Usher entered that courtroom, journalists reached for pens like weapons. The rhythm of typing on laptops stopped. Because no one had expected him. Not here. Not now. Not for this. For decades, Usher had been the face of polished perfection. A Grammy-winning icon, child star turned global sensation. He was the safe artist. The smooth voice. The sharp suit. The unproblematic legacy. But today, under oath, that legacy was about to burn down. He took the stand, adjusted the mic, and looked straight ahead, not at Diddy, not at the jury, not even at the prosecutor. He looked at the wall. As if trying not to make eye contact with the ghosts he'd kept locked away for 2 decades. The clerk asked him to state his name for the record. "Usher Raymond IV," he said. His voice, clear, but fragile. Like it had waited a lifetime for this moment. The prosecutor walked up slowly. "Mr. Raymond, are you ready to share your truth with the court?" Usher nodded once. Then he swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. I've been ready for a long time. But I was afraid. And now I'm not." The prosecutor stepped aside. And what followed next was one of the most harrowing testimonies in the history of celebrity legal trials. Because this wasn't a story about music, or fame, or industry politics. This was a story about a 14-year-old boy who had been promised a future and walked straight into a system that knew how to turn silence into currency. He told me I was going to learn how to become a star, but what I saw inside that penthouse was nothing short of psychological warfare. Usher shifted in the witness chair. He placed both hands on the table in front of him and took a breath that sounded like it had weight. A lifetime of silence, breaking, one sentence at a time. "I was 14 when I moved into Diddy's penthouse in Manhattan," he began. "My mom thought it was a mentorship. My label called it an opportunity. But it wasn't either of those things. It was something else." The prosecutor gently asked, "Mr. Raymond, what do you remember about your first night there?" Usher looked down, blinked. And then, the smell of candles. Expensive ones. Like vanilla but sharp. There were champagne bottles on the kitchen counter. Empty glasses. A woman I didn't recognize asleep on the sofa. It was 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. The courtroom froze. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Even Diddy's legal team stopped scribbling notes. "I was just a boy," Usher continued. "I had a suitcase and a notebook full of songs. I thought I'd walk into a music studio. I thought he'd ask me to sing. But instead, he handed me a glass of orange juice and said, 'Get comfortable. You'll see how the game really works.'" He described the penthouse. Modern. Cold. Dozens of rooms, some with locks. A wall of mirrors. A floor that always smelled freshly waxed. But it wasn't luxury that stood out. It was the performance of power. "It didn't feel like a home," Usher said. "It felt like a movie set, except I never got a script." That night, he was shown his room, plush bed, blackout curtains, soundproof walls. He didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard music. Soft. Like jazz slowed down and filtered through molasses. He got up, walked toward the hallway. What he saw next still haunts him. "There were people in masks," he said. "Not Halloween masks. Not playful. Ceremonial. Black. Expressionless." He paused, rubbing the back of his hand like it helped him feel present. They walked in, one after another. Men. Women. Maybe 8, maybe more. They didn't speak. Just floated through the hall toward the living room. Usher followed, heart pounding. What he saw when he peeked around the corner didn't look like a party. It looked like a ritual. There were candles on the floor, cameras, a clipboard on a side table. Some people were naked, others fully dressed. But no one looked surprised. Not even the ones being filmed. The prosecutor asked, gently, "Did you understand what was happening?" Usher shook his head. "Not then. I thought maybe it was a video shoot. I thought I was dreaming. But something in my stomach twisted. Something told me, you're not supposed to be here." He said Diddy spotted him. He smiled. Not like someone caught doing something wrong. Like someone inviting you into a secret. Diddy walked over and whispered, "Go back to bed. You'll understand when you're older." Usher turned and ran. He didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The next morning, nothing was said. No explanation. No follow-up. "They made me pancakes," he said quietly. Like nothing had happened. That was the first night Usher realized something was wrong. But it wouldn't be the last. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't living in a house. I was living inside a power structure. And I wasn't there to learn music. I was there to be shaped. Usher adjusted the microphone again. His hands didn't shake, but his eyes had glassed over, not with tears, but with restraint. A man remembering a moment that stole his boyhood. The prosecutor asked softly, "Mr. Raymond, did you ever sign any documents that restricted you from speaking about your experiences?" Usher nodded. "I signed a non-disclosure agreement when I was 16 years old. But it wasn't just about business." The courtroom leaned in. The kind of silence that sounds like pressure. "They told me it was standard," he continued. "They said it protected the label. That it was just a formality. But it wasn't. That NDA was a muzzle." He reached for a folder. From it, he pulled out a photocopy of a contract, slightly faded at the edges. A court clerk took it and handed it to the judge. The prosecutor approached the exhibit table. "Permission to read selected language, Your Honor?" "Granted," the judge replied. She read aloud from the clause. "The undersigned agrees to withhold from public dissemination any detail, direct or peripheral, relating to private events, exclusive gatherings, or undocumented engagements occurring under mentorship or brand exposure initiatives." Usher looked at the jury. "I didn't even know what those words meant. I was 16. I thought I was signing a protection agreement. Turns out, I was signing away my right to ever speak." He said he remembered asking his mother, "Should I sign this?" She had looked at the label reps, who smiled like lawyers do when they want you to think everything is normal. They told her it was standard. That Michael Jackson had signed something similar. "I didn't want to disappoint anyone. So I signed." What no one told him was that the contract would follow him into adulthood like a ghost. Years later, in 2009, Usher attempted to speak out in an interview with a prominent magazine. He had just wrapped a photo shoot. The journalist asked casually, "What was it like living with Diddy as a teen?" Usher froze. "The moment I walked off set, I got a call. Not from my publicist. From a number I didn't recognize. A voice said, 'We saw the questions. Don't go off script. You know the rules.'" The jury looked shaken. The prosecutor asked, "Who did you believe was behind the call?" "The label," Usher said. "Or someone protecting Diddy. Maybe both. But that's when I understood, this contract wasn't paper. It was a leash." He said the intimidation didn't stop there. "A week later, I got a letter from an old bad boy legal contact reminding me of the terms of the NDA. It was worded like a warning, but it read like a threat. One line stuck with me. It said, 'We hope your reputation isn't something you're willing to gamble.'" He paused. It wasn't about music anymore. It was about silence management. Then came the most devastating revelation of this scene. Usher revealed that when he once asked to renegotiate the NDA, quietly, through his new lawyers, the response from a senior executive was chilling. "The moment you open that door, we'll bury you in litigation until you forget why you knocked." The gallery stirred. The judge called for order. Usher didn't flinch. That contract made me question reality, he said. It made me feel like everything I saw, everything I remembered, didn't matter. Because legally, I wasn't allowed to say it out loud. The prosecutor asked, "So why now, Mr. Raymond? Why break the silence today?" Usher's voice didn't waver. Because that contract protected predators. Not the brand. Not the music. Not me. It protected a system built on fear. I signed it when I didn't know better. But I know better now. That NDA didn't just stop me from talking, it gave them permission to keep doing what they were doing. And now, I'm tearing it up, in front of the whole world. The prosecutor paced slowly in front of the witness stand. She didn't need theatrics. The truth was doing all the work. "Mr. Raymond," she began, "you testified earlier about a trip to the Caribbean when you were 15 years old. Can you tell the court what that trip was for?" Usher closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them again, something had shifted. A flicker of nausea. Or shame. Or both. "They called it a retreat," he said. "Just me, Diddy, and a few others. They said it would be private. No press. No entourage. Just time to rest, write, and grow. They told me it was to help me mature into the brand." The prosecutor asked, "Did anyone from the label accompany you?" "No. No one. Not even a bodyguard." Usher described arriving at a private landing strip, then boarding a chartered boat to a remote island villa in the Caribbean. There were 6 bedrooms. 4 men. 2 boys. I was one of them. He paused. Looked down. His voice dipped into a register that made the courtroom feel colder. "The first night, they gave us champagne. I didn't want it. But everyone else was drinking. They laughed at me when I asked for juice." He said there were no instruments. No studio. No cameras. No scheduled writing sessions. It wasn't about music. Not even a little. Instead, there were themed nights. One night was called Luxury Lessons. We were told to wear robes and meet by the pool. Diddy brought out cigars, jewelry boxes, and expensive colognes. He told us, "You want to live like this? Then you need to know how to live like this." But what started as material showmanship turned into something darker. They asked me questions. Personal ones. About my relationships. My fantasies. About what I'd be willing to do for success. One man said, "Every king has his secrets. Are you ready to carry ours?" The courtroom sat frozen. Not a breath. The prosecutor asked carefully, "Did anything physical happen on that trip?" Usher exhaled. "I won't talk about all of it. But what I will say is, I didn't feel safe. And I wasn't given a choice about the environment I was placed in." He described being followed one night, into the hallway, then into the outdoor shower area by one of the older men on the trip. He didn't touch me. But he stood there, blocking the path, and said, "You're special. You're chosen. Don't ruin this by being difficult." Usher was 15. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. He locked his door and pushed a desk in front of it. The next morning, Diddy acted like nothing happened. Greeted him with a smile and an omelette. Said, "You'll understand in time. This is how power is built." Usher told the court. That's when I realized I was trapped. On an island. Surrounded by people who didn't see me as a kid. They saw me as a product. A vessel. He added. I looked around and realized there were no witnesses. No friends. No press. And no way off that island unless they said so. The prosecutor asked, "Did you report this trip to anyone when you returned?" I tried. He said he told a label assistant that the trip felt strange. Her reply, "You're not the first artist who's been reoriented. Just smile and keep recording." Usher's face darkened. That's when I stopped trusting everyone. I realized the machine was bigger than me. That even if I screamed, no one would hear it, because the soundproofing wasn't just in the walls. It was in the contracts, in the money, in the culture. And then came the line that shifted the energy in the entire room. I didn't walk into fame. I walked into a cult of silence. One where the price of success was your soul, and your silence was the receipt. They called it mentorship. But it was never about growth, it was about grooming. And by the time I understood that, it was already too late. The prosecutor walked back toward the podium, allowing the gravity of Usher's testimony to sink in before she spoke again. "Mr. Raymond," she said, "after returning from the Caribbean, how did your relationship with Mr. Combs evolve?" Usher answered without hesitation. "He got more controlling. The parties got darker. The rules started multiplying. I wasn't an artist anymore. I was a property under supervision." He recalled the strange new dynamics. There were people around me I didn't recognize anymore. New assistants. New handlers. People who didn't work for my team, but always knew where I was going. What I was saying. Who I was with. That's when the surveillance began. Usher said he'd receive midnight calls from blocked numbers. If he skipped a party, someone would notice. If he canceled a meeting, someone would ask why. And if he hinted at leaving Diddy's circle, the response was immediate. I once told someone on my label that I was considering switching management. The next day, Diddy had dinner with the label head, and 3 of my future projects got put on pause. But the psychological manipulation was more damaging than the business moves. He'd tell me, "You're one of the chosen. You think you're gonna get this kind of love out there? You leave me, and you disappear." That line haunted Usher, because he'd seen it happen before. He looked at the jury and asked quietly, "Have you ever seen someone vanish while standing right next to you?" He spoke of 2 rising artists who had once stayed at Diddy's mansion around the same time. They were talented. One sang better than me. One danced better than anyone I'd ever seen. They were both gone within months. He reached into his folder and held up 2 old demo tapes. "These are the only proof I have they existed. No public contracts. No credits. No careers." One of the tapes had a name scribbled in Sharpie, Marquis L. The prosecutor asked, "Did you try to contact him?" Usher shook his head. He disappeared. Phone disconnected. Socials deleted. His cousin said he moved to Europe. But no one knows where. Or why. He looked at Diddy, then back at the court. I remember asking Puffy what happened to him. He just smiled and said, "Not everyone's built for the pressure." That smile, Usher said, became a warning. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't say. Because in Diddy's world, silence is a language. And fear is fluent. He told the court about another chilling moment. In 2009, I was working with a journalist from a respected outlet. I finally felt ready to talk. Not publicly, but quietly. Just to process. He said they met for coffee in L.A. The journalist asked if Usher had ever felt unsafe around powerful figures as a teen. Before I could answer, I got a text from someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. It said, "This the game you want to play?" The journalist backed out of the story. The piece never ran. Usher tried again a year later, this time with a producer from a major news network. We met once. Scheduled a second meeting. But she canceled. Then she ghosted me. Never responded again. I found out months later she got hired by Revolt TV, a media company founded by Diddy. The courtroom sat still. Usher's voice cracked for the first time. That's when I realized the machine wasn't just protecting him. It was erasing us. The prosecutor asked him to clarify. "You're saying other victims exist?" Usher nodded. "Yes. Artists. Assistants. Drivers. Stylists. Some left the industry. Some broke down. Some just disappeared. And the ones who stayed." He looked around the courtroom. They learned how to smile through it. Just like I did. He then told the court that every time he tried to speak out, a message followed. Sometimes it was a lawyer's letter. Sometimes a blocked call. Sometimes a simple phrase whispered backstage. But always the same message. "You talk, you're done." I didn't get death threats. I got something worse, the promise of silence. The kind that doesn't come with noise, but with vanishing acts. The air in the courtroom had thickened. Reporters scribbled furiously, barely blinking. The judge leaned forward slightly, not out of curiosity, but caution. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was becoming history. The prosecutor cleared her throat and stepped closer to the witness stand. "Mr. Raymond," she said, "can you tell us about the Atlanta event in 1996, the one you described in your pre-trial deposition as the night that changed you?" Usher sat back slightly. He nodded. Slowly. "Yes. I remember every minute of it." He explained that in the fall of 1996, just after his debut album dropped, he was invited by Diddy to an exclusive industry celebration in Atlanta. Not a concert. Not a tour launch. A private gathering. He said I needed to be seen by the right people. That I was about to level up. He arrived by limousine. The address. A private mansion behind a gated property in Buckhead. Marble floors. Crystal chandeliers. Security at every door. Inside, it was all celebrities. Athletes. Executives. I remember thinking, this is what winning looks like. But the deeper he went into the house, the more surreal it became. There were no press. No cell phones allowed. Phones were confiscated at the door. Everyone signed NDAs before entering. That wasn't unusual, but the tone was. He described how the atmosphere shifted after midnight. The music slowed. The energy dimmed. Guests moved like they knew what was about to happen. I was told to stick with Diddy. That he'd introduce me to the right room. They walked down a private hallway. Usher remembers every detail. A velvet rope. A double door. 2 guards. And then Diddy turned to him and said something that has never left his mind. "You're not ready for what's in there. But you will be. Eventually." Usher hesitated. He asked, "What's inside?" Diddy just grinned. "Initiation." The guards opened the door slightly. Enough for Usher to see shadows, figures, masks. That word again. Masks. They weren't costumes, Usher told the court. They were symbols. Everyone inside was wearing one, even the people I recognized. He couldn't see much, but he saw movement. Structured. Rehearsed. It didn't look like a party. It looked like a performance. But not the kind with music. He turned away. Told Diddy he wasn't ready. Diddy chuckled. "One day, you'll understand what this industry really costs." Usher left the party early that night. Alone. No driver. No handler. Just a stomach full of fear and a growing sense of moral nausea. "That was the moment I started writing it all down," he told the court. He reached into his folder again, this time pulling out a black, spiral-bound notebook, faded with age. "This is my real diary. I started it in 1996. I told everyone it was for lyrics. But really, it was for survival." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Is this being submitted into evidence?" "Yes, Your Honor," the prosecutor said. "Exhibit 27, the Usher Journal." The courtroom froze. Usher flipped to a page and read aloud. October 27, 1996. Mansion party tonight. Beautiful but fake. Heard whispers behind the walls. Saw masks. Diddy says I'll understand soon. I don't want to understand. Another entry from March 1999. Dinner with Diddy and 2 execs. They talked about loyalty like it was currency. Said, loyalty keeps you on tour. Honesty puts you back home. Diddy laughed. And another from October 2000. Invited again tonight. Declined. Can't take another night of secrets. Too many masks. Too many lies. He says it's just culture. I don't agree. The prosecutor asked, "Did you ever share this journal with anyone?" "No," Usher replied. "Because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Back then, Diddy was untouchable. I was just the kid with a voice and a clean image. If I'd come forward, it would have been career suicide. But now, with a federal investigation in motion, with other victims testifying, and with the world finally listening, he no longer feared the truth." Usher looked directly at the jury. That room behind the locked door? That wasn't just a secret. That was a warning. And now I know what it was warning me about, the price of fame when you're too young to understand the cost. They told me not to look behind the door. But I did. And I've spent the rest of my life trying to unsee it.
Usher leaned forward now, elbows on the witness table. For the first time, he wasn't just recounting the past. He was confronting it. Prosecutor stepped in carefully. Mr. Raymond, you've spoken about your own experiences, but did you ever witness similar behavior happening to others under Mr. Combs' mentorship? Usher didn't hesitate. Yes. One person in particular. Justin. He paused, then clarified. Justin Bieber. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Usher had long been credited with discovering Bieber, guiding him, mentoring him, protecting him. Their relationship had been celebrated. But now, for the first time, the truth behind the headlines was coming out. When I met Justin, he was just a boy. Talented. Hungry. Innocent. I saw myself in him. And I promised myself I wouldn't let him go through what I did. First, things were good. He was surrounded by good people. Cooter. His mom. And I made sure he was always with security. But then Diddy took an interest. He started inviting Justin to events. Late-night meetings. Industry mixers. I told Justin not to go without me. But there were times I couldn't be there. One night in 2011, Usher got a call at 2:17 a.m. Blocked number. He answered. It was Justin. He didn't say anything at first. Just silence. I could hear him breathing. And then, very quietly, he said, I want to come home. Usher sat up in bed. Heart racing. I asked him where he was. He wouldn't say. Just repeated, I want to come home. Then the line went dead. Usher's team scrambled to find him. Took 2 days. When we finally got to him, he wouldn't look me in the eye. I asked him what happened. He said, it's fine. I'm good now. But I knew that tone. That wasn't a fine tone. That was survival talk. Usher confronted Diddy privately days later. I said, what are you doing with him? Diddy laughed. Same thing they did to me. It's how the game works. That sentence hit Usher like a hammer. It was the first time I realized this wasn't a cycle that happened to him. This was a cycle he chose to repeat. He paused. Looked at the defense table. He had a chance to break the chain. And instead, he became the link that held it together. The prosecutor asked, did you warn Justin or his team? Usher nodded. I tried. But I was careful. I couldn't speak directly. I was still under NDA. I just told them, trust your instincts. Protect your space. No opportunity is worth your peace of mind. A long silence passed. Then Usher said something that brought the courtroom to a new level of stillness. That call from Justin, it was the same voice I had at 15. The same fear. The same shame. And when I heard it in him, I realized my silence didn't just protect Diddy. It exposed others. He said he stayed distant after that. Stopped answering Diddy's calls. Removed himself from joint projects. Burned bridges. On purpose. That's when the pressure started. Anonymous texts. Tabloid rumors. Fake stories planted to discredit him. It was like a warning. Like they were saying, don't forget who controls the narrative. And then the final straw. 2018, Usher received a voicemail from an unknown number. A low male voice said, tell him to keep his mouth shut. Or we'll shut it for him. Usher saved the recording. He played it in court. The voice wasn't identifiable, but the intent was crystal clear. The prosecutor asked, who do you believe was behind the call? Usher didn't blink. I think you know. He looked directly at the defense table. Then turned to the judge. Then to the court audience. That call wasn't about me. It was about fear. It was a reminder that no one, not even me, was allowed to tell the truth. Not in that world. They tried to silence me again. But this time I wasn't the scared 14-year-old in the penthouse. This time I came with receipts. Usher leaned back in the witness chair. Not in defiance, in exhaustion. What he was about to reveal wasn't just testimony. It was confession. Prosecutor took a moment, then asked, "Mr. Raymond, did there come a point when you fully severed ties with Mr. Combs?" Usher nodded slowly. "Yes. One night made that decision for me. I never spoke about it publicly. Until now." He took a breath. "It was 2002. I was 23. Diddy invited me to a private event in the Hollywood Hills. He said it was important, that I'd meet a European producer who could change everything for my next album." Usher hesitated when he received the address. It wasn't a studio. It was an estate. No branding. No logos. Just gates. Big gates. He was told to arrive alone. When he showed up, the guards at the entrance collected his phone. Then they handed him a contract, thicker than usual NDAs. I asked what it was. One of the guards said, "Just sign it or turn around." He signed. Inside, the mood was eerily familiar. Dim lighting. Scented candles. Minimal conversation. Soft music vibrating through the floorboards. There were celebrities I recognized. Some I'd never seen publicly tied to Diddy. Some didn't belong to the music world at all. Political figures. Executives. The people you only read about. Usher was led down a narrow hallway to a private lounge, where nothing was being filmed but everything was being watched. There were observers. That's the only word I can use. People in masks. Sitting quietly. Watching. Not talking. He described how people were selected, brought from one room to another, almost like scenes in a play. It felt like a test. Like someone was watching how far you'd go. Who you'd obey. What you'd tolerate. At one point, Usher tried to leave. He got up, walked back toward the hallway. A man I didn't recognize stopped me. He wasn't security. He was calm. Smiling. But he blocked the exit. Then Diddy appeared. Sitting in a low chair in the corner of the hallway. Watching. He looked at Usher and said, "You still think this is about music? This is bigger than that." Usher didn't respond. He turned around, walked to a side door and exited through the garden. He found a back gate. Climbed it. That was the last party I ever went to. The last call I took from him. That was the moment I knew. I had stayed too long. The prosecutor asked, "Can you describe the contract you were asked to sign that night?" Usher nodded. It wasn't a standard NDA. It included language I'd never seen. It used terms like event participation liability, non-cataloged attendees, and something called influence immunity. Courtroom stirred. I took a picture of the contract later when I found a copy in an old briefcase. That photo was encrypted and stored in a private email. I still have it. He handed the printed image to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. The judge reviewed it. His face changed. He passed it to the prosecution. Exhibit 31. Admitted. Usher looked at the jury. That contract wasn't to protect their ideas. It was to protect their power. He turned toward the audience gallery. And the masks weren't fashion. They were ritual. They meant something. I still don't know what. But I know this. No one inside that house was surprised by what they saw. Except me. The prosecutor asked, "Did you recognize anyone else there?" Usher paused. "Yes, but I'm not naming them here. 'Cause I believe more people will come forward. If this trial continues, I know others will speak. But it's not my place to out them now." Courtroom held its breath. Usher added. But I will say this, some of the faces inside that house have been on magazine covers, on red carpets, on award stages, and the world thinks they're clean. He looked at Diddy. But we all saw each other. We all knew. Then came the final bombshell. When I left that party, I knew I couldn't be part of it anymore. But that didn't mean I was free. He said that over the next 6 months, 2 sponsorships were pulled without warning. 1 album delay was blamed on creative direction, and 1 anonymous caller left a voicemail that simply said, "Be careful what you remember." Usher saved that message too. That house in the hills wasn't just a location. It was the epicenter of the system. And once you walked through those gates, the silence wasn't just expected. It was enforced. The lights in the courtroom seemed softer now, like even the walls were absorbing the weight of the story. No one whispered. No one shuffled. No phones buzzed. 'Cause what Usher was about to share had never been told. Not in interviews, not in documentaries, not even in rumor. Prosecutor approached carefully. "Mr. Raymond, following that night in Hollywood, did your mental health change?" Usher didn't speak for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Yes. Broke me. Quietly." He explained that in 2001, right after the release of his breakthrough album 8701, at the height of his fame, something unseen cracked inside him. "I should have been celebrating. Sold-out shows. #1 hits. But I couldn't sleep. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't trust my own reflection." The prosecutor asked, "Did you seek help?" Usher nodded again. "Yes. I checked into a private mental health facility in Northern California. Under a false name." Courtroom tensed. Not even my team knew the real reason. Public thought I was taking a break. But really, I was trying not to collapse. He described the symptoms. Flashing lights triggered panic. Certain perfumes sent him spiraling. Candles, the same scent from Diddy's penthouse, made his hands tremble. One night in New York, I walked into a hotel hallway, smelled those candles. My whole body locked up. I collapsed against the wall and started crying. I couldn't explain it. Couldn't move. That was the night his manager rushed him to a facility. He stayed for 5 days. I told the psychiatrist everything. Not about the music. Not the fame. About the house. The island. The masks. Contracts. The silence. He looked at the jury. I told him I saw things no child should see. I told him the world thought I was a prodigy, but inside I was still trapped in that penthouse hallway at 3 a.m. The doctor diagnosed him with PTSD. He began therapy. Every week. For almost 2 years. People thought I was just rebranding. A new sound. A new look. But I wasn't evolving. I was unraveling. He said every show felt like a mask. I sang about love, about passion, about control, but behind the mic I was numb. I could perform in front of 10,000 people and feel completely alone. One day in therapy, the counselor asked, "What would you say to the boy you were at 14? Usher didn't answer that day. But in court he finally did. Looking into the microphone, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have protected you. I should have told someone. But I was just trying to survive." He said the worst part wasn't the trauma itself. It was the way the world demanded he pretend it never happened. Every time I won an award, they said I was lucky. Every time I smiled in a photo, they thought I was happy. But they didn't see the nights I woke up screaming, or the times I stood backstage, shaking so hard I couldn't hold the mic. The prosecutor asked, "Did anyone else from the industry know?" Usher nodded. Some knew. Most suspected. But no one said anything. 'Cause silence is the currency of power. And fear is its strongest interest. He looked around the courtroom, the walls, the jury, the press gallery. I had the money to get help, but not everyone did. He recounted. One artist overdosed. Another tried to take their own life. A third just vanished. I remember his voice. I remember how scared he was. And I remember how the label scrubbed him from everything. Like he never existed. Usher's voice cracked. That's what this machine does. Doesn't just create stars. It erases witnesses. He closed the notebook in front of him. The same one with decades of pain scribbled between song lyrics. I thought if I stayed silent I could protect what I'd built. My name. My legacy. But you can't build a future on secrets. I survived Puffy. But I'm still not sure the kid inside me did. And I refuse to let that happen to anyone else, not on my watch. Usher sat up straighter in the witness chair. Courtroom was breathless. He wasn't just giving testimony anymore. He was giving a closing statement to a generation. Prosecutor, now visibly moved, asked, Mr. Raymond, if you could speak to those watching, the fans, the victims, the young artists just entering this industry, what would you say to them now? Usher turned toward the microphone, but he didn't speak right away. He looked out across the gallery. Then he looked at the defense table. Then the jury. And finally up toward the ceiling. Then he began. I used to think silence was protection. That if I didn't talk, I could keep my career intact. That I could preserve the dream. But I know now silence wasn't protecting me. It was protecting him. He continued. There are people watching this right now who've been through something. Maybe not in the music industry. Maybe not in a mansion or a penthouse. But something. Something they weren't allowed to speak about. Something that made them question if what they saw was even real. He tapped the table softly with his fingers. To those people, I'm here to say you're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not weak. You're just carrying the weight of truth in a world that rewards lies. He then turned his full attention to the jury. This trial isn't just about Sean Combs. It's about the machine that let him rise. The machine that turned a blind eye because the music was good, the clothes were clean, and the parties were legendary. He paused. Let the silence hang like thunder. It's about the executives who laughed at rumors and signed NDAs behind closed doors. Publicists who spun stories and buried trauma in the name of branding. The lawyers who built careers off silencing pain with paperwork. His voice rose slowly, not shouting but resonating. This is about the kids. The ones who sing in talent shows. Who dream big. Who think mentorship means music lessons, not manipulation. Who think fame is a blessing, not a sentence. Usher's hands trembled now, but his voice did not. I was 14. And for 2 decades I convinced myself I was lucky. Lucky to be around power. Lucky to be chosen. But I wasn't lucky. I was groomed. I was controlled. I was silenced. He then reached into his folder one final time and pulled out a page. It wasn't a contract or a legal document. It was a journal entry. Unpublished. Undated. Written the night he finally left Diddy's circle for good. He read it aloud. I survived Puffy. But did the kid in me survive? I still don't know. I don't hate him. But I can't carry him anymore. The mask is too heavy. The silence is too loud. And I want my voice back. The courtroom froze. Even the stenographer paused, visibly shaken. Usher folded the paper. Placed it back in his folder. I didn't come here today for revenge. I came here for release. And for everyone else still trapped in that penthouse, still stuck behind that locked door, still hearing those same candles burn. I see you. He turned toward the judge, his voice soft again. Your Honor, I have nothing more to say. Except this, I'm not afraid anymore. Not for me. Because I've already lived through it. He stood from the witness chair. Looked out at the press. Public. The entire industry, listening from behind screens and headlines, and said, "I'm speaking for the ones who never made it out." And with that, he walked off the stand. No applause. No music. Just the quiet recognition that something irreversible had happened. A wall had been broken. A silence had been shattered. And the voice of a 14-year-old boy, buried under platinum records and a polished legacy, had finally been heard. What began as a trial against a single man had now become a reckoning for decades of exploitation hidden behind fame, fashion, and billion-dollar contracts. Courtroom didn't just hear a testimony. It heard a cry that echoed across generations of artists who were told to be quiet, who were taught that power meant submission, that silence was safer than truth. But not anymore. Because in one moment, Usher Raymond, the child star, the hitmaker, the icon, finally chose truth over legacy. And in doing so, he didn't just reclaim his voice. He gave thousands permission to find theirs.